Chapter 30, Section 1. Eisenhower had been president. People liked Ike, but Ike cannot run again due to the 22nd Amendment being passed in 1951. That's the amendment that limits a president to 2 terms. So we're going to have a wide open election here. The Republicans are going to nominate Richard Nixon. He had been Ike's vice president. Good performance. He's going to choose as his vice presidential candidate Henry Cabot Lodge. The Democrats are going to choose John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Some people were worried about Kennedy being a Catholic and that this could hurt him in this election. We had never had a Catholic president before. But Kennedy assured people, he believed in the separation of church and state. Wasn't going to, the Pope wasn't going to be, our ruler or anything like that. And Kennedy's going to choose as his vice presidential candidate Lyndon Baines Johnson. Now, some people very much disliked Johnson. Some people called Johnson Kennedy's worst mistake. But part of the reason that Johnson was chosen was because he was a Southerner. And Kennedy was weak in the South, so hopefully they thought that this could bring him some more of those Southern Democrat votes. TV debates became big during this election, the election of 60. In the debate, JFK appeared cool, calm, and collected. Nixon, on the other hand, had been campaigning nonstop. He was weary. He was disheveled. And they took a poll after the TV debates. They took a poll. People that had listened to the debates on the radio thought Nixon had won. People who watched the debates on TV thought Kennedy had won. So it wasn't just about what you said anymore. It was about appearance as well. JFK wins the election, becoming the youngest person ever elected to the presidency at 43 years old. Now, Kennedy is going to keep a lot of policies very similar to what Ike had. Kennedy kept the buildup of nuclear arms. But Kennedy also built up other options as well. This idea is going to be called flexible response. This is where you built up the conventional military as well. If all you build up is nukes and something happens, the only way you have to respond is with nukes. And so Kennedy wanted flexible options, flexible response. He established special units. For example, the Green Berets were established. The Green Berets, when they were first established, they were to assist struggling countries fight against communism. Green Berets still exist today. Their program, their purpose has obviously changed a little bit over the years. Another thing Kennedy pushed was aid programs to help out countries. If you have a developing country that needs help and you help them, that country becomes dependent on you, more loyal to you, which could block out Soviet influence. Under Kennedy, you saw the Peace Corps begin, where volunteers could go for a couple years or whatever to work in a developing country, helping out Asia, Africa, Latin America, places like that. All right, so you got this time where the big concern is the Soviet Union. Well, the Soviet Union is going to get a foothold in Latin America. In 1959, Fidel Castro comes to power in Cuba. Castro bragged he was the reason President Kennedy can't sleep at night, because Cuba's 90 miles from the U.S. When Kennedy becomes president, he is going to learn that the CIA was already planning to overthrow Castro. Okay, and he's told basically, we already got it underway. Just sign here. We're gonna get this done. And new president, he basically says, okay, I trust you. The CIA was training and financing anti-Castro Cuban refugees to invade Cuba. We weren't sending our soldiers there. These were Cubans that had escaped Cuba, that were against Castro. And so what you're going to have is on April 17th, 1961, you're going to have 1,500 rebels land at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. This is going to be a disaster from the start. Three big reasons here for this failure. Number one, the landing spot was horrible. The landing spot was horrible. I mean, there were sharp reefs where they were landing. Once they'd get on shore, there was swampy terrain they'd have to go through, and the beach area had floodlights that lit up the beach. I mean, you couldn't pick a worse area to land to launch this invasion. The second reason is naval and air support from the U.S. didn't occur. We had told these rebels, these 1,500 rebels, that they'd have support from U.S. ships and planes. We backed off of that. And number three, 1,500 people can't take over Cuba. The hope was, as these people invade, there's going to be other Cubans that will rise up and join with them against Castro. That never happened. It's going to take Cuba 72 hours to crush this invasion. And they captured 1,200 of the rebels. This failed invasion pushed Castro even closer to the Soviets. And as far as blame goes for this, JFK took full responsibility. It wasn't necessarily his fault, but because he was president, he took the responsibility for it. But JFK is going to resolve that from now on, he's going to take more control of foreign affairs. If it's going to fall back on him, he's going to be involved. After the Bay of Pigs fiasco, Khrushchev, views Kennedy as weak. This new president of ours, and Khrushchev decides to push this and see what he can get here. Khrushchev is going to demand that the West recognize the sovereignty of East Germany. And that means get your troops out of Berlin. Berlin is in East Germany. It should be all of East Germany. Get your troops out of Berlin. And the Soviet Union is going to put up barbed wire fence between East and West Berlin. Like literally overnight. People went to sleep. When they woke up the next morning, there was a fence separating them. Right across the streets, in between neighbors' houses, whatever. The way we responded, JFK didn't back down. JFK actually sent more troops to Berlin. He wasn't going to let Khrushchev push him around. It seemed like war was going to be imminent. But the tension starts to ease. Khrushchev had actually achieved his real goal. The real goal was to stop the mass exodus of East Germans to West Berlin. People were leaving the East in droves by going to West Berlin and getting out. This barbed wire fence eventually becomes a wall, with watchtowers. More pictures, you can see the wall as it was built there. There's one of the checkpoints and watchtowers. You would see a lot of graffiti on the wall, artistic graffiti, a lot of times making political points, which you'll see one in here in a minute. On the east side there, on the left side there, you can see the east side. There's kind of almost a no man's land in the middle there, full of, could be mined. Part of it would be mined. keeping watchtowers with machine guns to make sure people don't cross that. Here's one of the political messages you would see with the East German leader and a Soviet minister there making a point about that. All right. Last thing we need to talk about here is going to be the Cuban Missile Crisis. Our policy of containment is going to continue to be tested. Castro, realizing that we had tried to invade them, Castro asks the Soviet Union if they could help them out by giving them some defensive weapons. The Soviet Union says we can do one better, and the Soviet Union offers them offensive weapons, nuclear weapons. These nuclear weapons could strike the east coast of the United States. Eventually, we find out they could even go farther. Now, we had missiles in Turkey 150 miles from the Soviet Union, so the Soviet Union didn't see any problem with putting them here. Bottom line is, okay, if you watch the movie 13 Days, you will see all of this play out. Bottom line is, we have a spy plane, a U-2, that is going to photograph the missile sites in Cuba. We announce basically a blockade, demanding that the Soviets remove the missiles. Over the next few days, tension mounts. I mean, we're arming our B-52s, loading them up with nuclear weapons. The Soviets are shipping more weapons to Cuba. Huge threat of nuclear war. In the end, the missiles will be removed with some deals that are made that you'll see in the movie 13 Days. And Khrushchev and Kennedy, put that threat of nuclear war back in the box there. But the Cuban Missile Crisis was a turning point in our relationship with the Soviet Union. It's the closest we've ever come to World War III. But JFK and Khrushchev realized how close we came. You're going to see the Limited Nuclear Test Ban Treaty signed, which will end the testing of nuclear weapons in the atmosphere and underwater. Basically, the only place this leaves would be nukes could be tested underground. That would be it. You're also going to see the establishment of a hotline, a direct line between the U.S. leader and the Soviet Union leader, so that in the time of a crisis they could communicate. And when we watch 13 Days, you will see a lot of question about who's communicating with who and who's the message from and stuff like that. This would enable, if a crisis were to occur, our leader and their leader could communicate effectively.